Thank you very much, and thank you all for making time on what seems to be the first glorious spring evening with daylight savings time to watch a Zoom call or a WebEx call. I appreciate your commitment to this, and I'd like to share with you at a high level how we intend to approach this project. We have barely gotten going. We are just starting to get into the park and do our work. So I'm going to walk you through both what a master plan is and what our process for pulling a master plan together will be. Again, per Director Johnson's comment, I found when we work on really large projects, the analogy, people know Central Park in New York geographically. It's a nice sort of metric to help understand how big is big. Your park is bigger. It's about 1,100 acres. It's just immense and a wonderful resource for the entire county. We are going to be focusing on 3 activity clusters, and this image on the right was taken of a model that I think is in the Nature Center. And I love it because it's 3-dimensional, so you can really see the topography of the site. The boundaries are a little outdated, but I guess part of the master plan, maybe we can update this model. But it's just a wonderful example of where things are and helps get people oriented. We're going to look at 3 activity clusters, the first being the Nature Center, and then the Cuba Road area, and then the lodge area over here. And then we're also going to be looking at the immense resources in the immense rest of the park and looking at the natural trail surface. All these little lines indicate various trail alignments that are in the park. And I know the Nature Council is anxious to make some of those trails more sustainable and supportable. So we'll be working with them and with the parks folks to figure out how best to do that. There's a lot of rich habitat in this forested landscape. There are potential rich, rare, and threatened and endangered species. We have corresponded with the state. There aren't any on record at the state, but that doesn't mean that there aren't some on the site, and some of you may know of those plants. Our team members started to look at the forest cover, both looking at plans that were done in 2007, the inventory work, and then building on that it's really probably a chestnut oak and tulip poplar forest. And then the Class 3 trout stream is a pretty amazing asset and resource to cherish in this park. So it's just a wonderland of rich and wonderful resources that we're really thrilled to be able to work with you on this. I think it's good to start with just defining how we define a master plan and how we're going to work with the county and with you all to develop a master plan for this park. A master plan is a high-level plan. It's not like a construction plan, and it really tries to orchestrate and provide guidance for the upcoming next 20, 25 years. So our time frame is, we're going to use the round number of 20, but what should happen in the park in the next 20 years? What should be improved? What should be taken away? What should be protected? How much will it cost? And how does that get choreographed? And are there partners? Are there ways to choreograph that within the county's CIP budget? How does all of that come together so that you don't do something in year 5 that has to get undone in year 10 because somebody had a better idea? So it's just trying to line up nurturing and stewardship of this park that's coherent. Our plan will at the end have a list of priorities based on what we hear from all of you and the large community, and how can those improvements be funded, and ballpark costs, not specific costs, because we're still working at a very general level, but degree of magnitude costs for those improvements. And then ultimately, any master plan that's useful must support the recreation desires for the residents of Baltimore County, whether that's hiking or walking or fishing or using a playground. We just have to listen to what you all care about, and that's what we need to incorporate into this plan. Why do a master plan right now? The last one was done in the 1980s, and a master plan is a really good time to stop and reboot and step back and ask some really important questions and be thoughtful about it and talk to each other about it. And then we'll come to an agreement as to what those priorities are. Like, what is important in this park? And we'll be talking to a wide array of people. We'll have a lot of outreach activities. We were just pulling together the initial list of folks we want to put in a focus group and an interview. So what is important to different people will be different things, and we want to hear all of those important activities or pieces of the park. What must be cherished and protected in the park? Are there places that absolutely do not do something? We need to know that, and then we can talk about it. What is missing from the park? Are there facilities? Are there activities? Are there infrastructure needs that are missing from the park that we need to get queued into this 20-year plan for enhancement and protection and improvement of the park? What activities are no longer appropriate? Are there things in the park, like perhaps is the dinner theater done, or does the dinner theater need to be revisited and repurposed? The lodge, the ski slope, are there things that can be repurposed? Should they be enhanced? Those are the kinds of questions we shall ask. My infamous turn on this was working for Fairfax County Park Authority on a very old master plan that was 30 years old. We decided archery was no longer appropriate, and we took it out the year before the Hunger Games was produced, and all the young women in Fairfax County wanted to take up archery. So you have to be careful, but there are cycles in sports or cycles in activities. So do horseshoes come out and other things come in? I don't know the answer. We want to hear from you, but those are the kinds of things we're seeking to get an understanding from you. What facilities should be enhanced or upgraded or removed? Again, some of your buildings as a nature center serving what it needs to do today, or does it need to be improved? Is it ADA accessible? Is it large enough to accommodate, now that we have larger grade schools with more, say, fourth graders in the group coming onto the site? Are there some enhancements that could be made to the nature center? The lodge is an incredibly wonderful asset to the park. Is it being used at its best and highest use, or are there some things we could recommend be done to the lodge to make it more useful to the park? Again, just looking at facilities, and facilities also include bathrooms. Bathrooms also include septic tanks. Septic tanks also include backup septic fields. So are we going to have any failure issues in the next 20 years that we need to talk about? And then stepping back, are there county demographics shifting, and how should the park respond to those changes? And this is a regional park. It's for people across the county. So are there new sports interests or new activity interests or new walking or activities that just are pop-up activities, like a Tai Chi class that happens on an open grassy field, that we need to make sure we've accommodated space for those kinds of uses? And then ultimately, the county has a good, strong record of planning. So how does this nest within the larger countywide adopted plans to make sure that we're in sync with the other missions of the county? The master planning schedule, we have not written the plan. We have not even done our field work yet. So we have nothing to put in a plan yet. So never fear, you will see a lot of us in the next 6 to 9 months. Spring and summer is when we will be out on the site doing our site condition assessment. Folks from our office will be assessing the playground, looking at the picnic pavilions, checking out the bathrooms. The architect on our team has already been out to start doing major drawings of the pavilion for the concerts, for the lodge, and for the nature center, with the idea that if, as we progress through this process, come summer, fall, do you want to make some changes or adaptations or renovations to those buildings? We have a measure drawing that we can then work from and develop some schematics for some recommendations. Our number cruncher team member will be talking to folks who rent the pavilions, who rent the lodge, to figure out what's the revenue, what are the costs of operating, what's the use. Are some pavilions used more than others? Are there certain sized pavilions that it would be better to add more of that size, or do you need larger pavilions? So we don't know the answer. We have to start looking at the data. We'll be gathering that data. And then this jargon LOS is level of service standards. So how do the provisions in the park nest with both state guidance and national standards in terms of activities per population? So it's just a good cross-check and a benchmark. It doesn't mean you have to meet them, but at least you're benchmarking so you know where you stand in relationship to state guidance and a national practice in terms of provision of activities. Park user input is a huge component of our scope. We will have both formal and informal ways of getting comments from folks. and I'll walk through those in a little bit. Once we started to get our field work together, we've got an understanding of what's in the park, we've started to talk to people, then come spring and summer of 2022, we'll start pulling together recommendations and ideas into 2 separate alternative plans. And they'll probably be far apart because it's often easier to get to the middle if you sort of talk about options and then pull from each of those plans to make the recommended plan. And we'll come back in probably September or October with our recommendations of what we've heard and what we've seen and what, based on all of that, we suggest the plan contain. And we'll ask for your input. You know, does this make sense? Does that not make sense? And then in summer, fall 2022, we'll then come back with a final plan based on your comments, both in text and in drawings for the next 20 years improvements. More specifically, the planning milestones and the public meetings and when we'll be looking for input. March 2022, we're just starting to organize, and we'll be reaching out to some of you probably on this call, looking to do interviews and focus groups with folks to get a better handle on some of the issues and concerns in the park. And then in May and June, we'll do a public survey. It'll be in multiple language, likely Spanish and English. And then we'll do a pop-up in the park where we literally will put a tent in the park and spend some time in the park, hoping people come to our tent. And if they don't, we will go find people, because we found in our years of working in parks, the folks that are often hard to reach are the casual, informal users of the park, and we want to make sure that they have a voice in the future of this park as well. Then in June 2022, we will have a public meeting. We will have finished all our field work. The natural resource folks will have done all their forest stand updates and their search for the amazing orchids, for the vernal pools, for the salamanders, and they will have documented all of that. Our side of the house will have looked at all of the facilities and said, based visually, these are good, poor, fair, whatever condition, these things need to be addressed. The architect will have wrapped up their examination of the buildings, and our number cruncher from Margaret's team will have a sense of what's rented, what's not rented, what kinds of operational issues are there. And we'll come back to you in June, share all of our findings with you, and that's when you can say, you really missed the boat, or you guys really got it, or there's some tweaks that we'd like you to add. So this is a really important meeting to be aware of, and it will get publicized. But June is the first real public meeting that'll be interactive, and we'll be looking to hear your responses on our work. In the summer, we have a team member who will provide a bilingual ranger in the park, who will also maybe do some outreach outside of the park. We will do more pop-ups in August. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we'll come back in September, October to share with you our ideas of potential ways the master plan could come together. We're probably going to tie that to some kind of event in the park, because not everybody will come to a concept alternative meeting because it doesn't mean anything to them. And if we have an event that people are already in the park, and then we do that in conjunction with our concept meeting, we may draw a bigger group for better input. And then finally in December, ideally, but with holidays, it may float into January of 2023, we'll do the public meeting on the final plan recommendations before it goes forward to any kind of a formal approval process. So there are 3 key points of big meetings, June, October, December, and then there are a lot of pop-ups and informal outreach. And we will have an email address on the project webpage. So we can always go back and forth via that email address, and you're welcome to share information and ideas with us throughout the entire process. I just want to briefly introduce our team so that you can know who's going to be working on this plan. And I've included the web addresses, and this deck of slides will get posted on the project website. So if you're curious about who are these people that are planning my park, you can look us up and see our past work. I'm Elizabeth Lardner, and I'm the principal, and I will be the prime project manager. We're the prime consultant for the project, and we will be overseeing the piece of the work that's related to master planning and landscape architecture. And Kara Smith is on this call. Kara and I will be doing a lot of field work together. Lisa Suri has worked with us on a number of past master plans and design projects, and she will be heavily involved in the vision stage and the compiling of the alternatives and the final recommendations. We have the firm CHMGS out of Boston. We've worked with them on a number of big public park master plans, and Margaret will represent that firm, and she'll be looking at the economics, market viability, and program assessment. For example, she'll back to the picnic shelters. Are the picnic shelters the right number based on what your rental is? Are there patterns that we can discern that if we just tweak something, it'll be better for everybody? Are there demand times when there aren't enough shelters, and how can that be adjusted? So Margaret will be coming back to folks in the park and looking for that kind of really important data to make sure that we're hitting it. And she will also do the demographic data search to make sure we're talking to folks who live around the park. Leslie Wood and Mark Burchick are from Environmental Systems Analysis. They're out of Crofton, Maryland, and we've worked with them for a couple decades on large regional master plans. They will be doing environmental inventory and impact and mitigation, and they've already started to correspond with DNR, and they've already started to compile all of the county's GIS layers to start to get a sense of what they want to then ground truth. And they will be out in the park April, May, July, and September, I believe. They're looking at 4 targeted area times of the year. That all can shift based on weather patterns, because they're looking for salamander eggs, they're looking for orchids, they're looking for leaf out, they're looking for owl nesting. So they're gonna adjust their times based on when spring and summer arrive. But generally, they have 4 big shots when they'll be out doing field work in the park. So if you see people wandering around, introduce yourself. They're wonderful and they're passionate. Ashley Howell is with MTFA, and for those of you close enough to the Pennsylvania border, MTFA absorbed the old John Milner architecture firm that was the national expert in preservation architecture, and that's Ashley's real moniker. So she and her team will be out looking at the buildings and looking at what reuse potentials there are, or upgrades or enhancements, and just be our sort of console on the architectural side. RK&K, based in Baltimore, our firm and RK&K have worked on a number of projects together, and Matt will be representing their engineering side. And if we have questions on stormwater erosion, Matt will be our truth person. So we can't do kind of an eyewash. Matt will say, no, that's not going to work. And then for public outreach, we have Chesapeake Conservancy, Gabby Rafi, who grew up just outside of Oregon Ridge. Literally, she ran on the Yellow Trail as a high schooler and in cross-country meets, and is going to show Mark where there's a hidden vernal pool. She and her firm will be doing a lot of outreach, particularly to communities like with the bilingual ranger, and also some activator events trying to get into different groups of folks who may not be in the park and hear what they have to say about the park. They're currently doing similar work for the state of Maryland at a number of state parks with great success in hearing people and being able to be bilingual. Odessa Phillip with Oswego will be helping us with an activator event at the September/October alternatives meeting. So we'll do something in the park that will draw people to the park. And stay tuned. We don't know what that is. We're all still trying to figure that out now, but we're just getting started. To give you a sense of the kind of work we do and the lessons that we've learned that we're going to apply to your beautiful park. Better resource protection. One of the things we're working on Costco Regional Park for Prince George's County MNC PPC right now. Very similar. Most all the team members are the same. And one of the things we did based on ESA's natural resource survey was realize that the large tracts of forest with the healthy interior forests were not being protected by the tree conservation areas that the county had put in place when they first adopted that legislation. So we worked with their environmental regulator, and we're going to try to reconfigure the tree conservation area so you end up with the same acreage, but instead of protecting the perimeter of the park as a buffer, you actually protect the resource of the interior forests. We're also working currently for Arlington County doing a natural trail surface inventory. So we will be interested to hear what the Nature Council speaks to as what they want to do with the natural trails in the park. and what the park operations wants to do with the natural trails in the park. Another value of a master plan is you can repurpose current resources to better meet new recreational interests and demands. And that's what we're doing both Watkins and at Costco. It's just, turn the dial, make sure everything matches. You can see the word cloud in the upper right that came out of the pop-up. This is literally during COVID, people with masks, but you could be out at the playground. So we did a pop-up, and then we merged sort of people's comments, and the things people were looking for were trails. There's a big lake at Costco that needs some love and care, nature, playground, fields, courts. It was fishing. It was just a good chance to see what are people valuing. I have found in parks, people don't understand how many people are now using trails for walking. And when we put trail counters out, it's actually exceeded field use in some parks with heavy field use. So people walk and they're more invisible. So getting a trail counter, so you know that there's a huge demand for trails and walking and health reasons these days. Reviews what's working, what's not working, what are revenues and expenses, are services meeting the needs of the surrounding community? Are the communities changing at all from when the park was first developed? Are there services that should be provided to that surrounding community as well as the county? So our task at hand in the development of this master plan is, how can Oregon Ridge Park, in the master plan, how can we protect valued natural resources? How can we engage the broad Baltimore County audience? And how can we better meet modern recreational needs and preferences? And this is what you can hold us to at the end of the day. This is sort of what we're setting as what we need to be addressing as part of this master planning process that's just beginning. In addition, the plan, and I just want to lay out some of the chunks of information or pieces of the document that will end up probably as technical appendices, but then will flow into the recommendations of the final plan. Natural resource management, so identifying forest land protections and FIDs, identifying if there are any RTEs or watch lists or other kinds of plants. The natural resource folks on our team will develop a running plant list and the plant communities associated with that, and we'll have that data as a discrete technical appendix as part of the master plan. Vernal pools and trout streams and stream health, this is your stream in the park, that will all be documented and then factored into the recommendations of the plan. Educational programming and facilities, looking at the Oregon Ridge Nature Center, stepping back, saying, when this started, this was doing X. Now that we're in year 2022, looking towards 2042, what should the Nature Center be doing? What facilities would help the Nature Center achieve what it needs to achieve? And so we'll be looking to you for those kinds of answers. Facility improvements, this is some of the unsexy part of the master plan, but is really fundamental. So we will be looking at infrastructure, electric, water, septic, stormwater. Your park's been in place for a long time. So are the septic systems adequate? Do they need backup fields? How do we look at restrooms, the lodge and concert pavilion, circulation and parking, picnic pavilions, entry signs are part of our scope to look at how to update, and then again, restrooms. So this is a big chunk of a master plan, not quite as glamorous, but really fundamental to the success and how we use the park. Accessibility, making sure that any new improvements are ADA compliant, or other existing restrooms and places like that within the park can be made ADA compliant, and expanding the trail network for inclusivity and range of abilities. Your park is also, besides its natural resource assets, it's also an arts and performance focused park. So how can we expand upon that, and what should we look at? Can it be a status as a hub for a gathering, retreat, entertainment, and performance? Do the performance facilities themselves need some upgrading to better serve the artists that are at the site? Is there additional public art and programming, and what do we need to incorporate in a master plan to help do that? And then there are expanded recreational activities. The playgrounds, even if they're not refreshed today, within 20 years will need refreshing. So what kind of playground makes sense? We will not be designing the playgrounds, but the master plan can sort of set the character that's desired, and then that's a guide to the Parks and Rec department when they're implementing those improvements. What's the role of the quarry pond? I know the history of the quarry pond, but what do you all want to see it used for in the future? It's currently used for some canoeing. Are there some facilities that could make that better? It's currently not used for fishing. Is that something that should be considered? I don't know the answer. We'll be looking to all of you for your input on that. And are there other recreational activities that we should be looking at? I was just at a Master Parks Plan meeting in Smyrna, Delaware that we're doing for the whole town, and I was astonished that disc golf is still coming up. People really wanted disc golf. So are there activities that people are hungry for? Pickleball is something that we're hearing a lot about, and I don't know if that's appropriate here or not, but are there activities that people are looking for that should be part of the consideration for elements in the new plan? So we're going to listen and learn. We're going to do a lot of engagement and outreach because this is your plan. It's not our plan. We're just here to help you put the plan together. We're going to use the Historic Association with the Arts to try to reach some new audiences and bring more folks into the conversation, whether we work with public artists or do an activator event, but just make sure that we're hearing from the full community in Baltimore County. We're going to connect with others to expand that same audience using visitor use surveys that are in multiple language, pop-ups in county neighborhoods, as well as within the park, a bilingual summer ranger in Oregon Ridge Park, activator event, and then Latino Conservation Week. Have a day the third week of July when Latino Conservation Week is a national event across the country. Do something in the park. We don't know what it will be yet. We're still talking and planning for that, but do something to celebrate that community and that activity. And with that, I want to thank you. This is the project webpage, and this is the email address. If you have questions or information you want to share with us, this is the best way to get a hold of us, and then it'll funnel through David and his team and then reach us.